What if I told you that the most generous person you know, the one who shows up at midnight, who remembers every single detail about your life, who gives and gives without ever asking for anything back? What if that person secretly believes they are worthless? Not in a dramatic way, not in a way they'd ever say out loud. But deep down, in the quiet moments when no one is watching, they feel like they are simply not enough. Here's the thing that most people never realize: the kindness and the self-hatred are not opposites. They are the exact same wound, just facing different directions. And today, we're going to talk about why. It starts in childhood, almost always. Not necessarily with abuse, not necessarily with anything dramatic enough to point to and say, "That's it, that's the moment." Sometimes it's quieter than that. It's growing up in a home where love felt like it had conditions attached, where affection appeared when you were good, when you were useful, when you made the adults around you proud, and quietly disappeared when you weren't. When a child grows up in that kind of environment, they learn one of the most dangerous lessons a human being can learn. Love is not something you receive, it is something you earn. And the fastest, most reliable way to earn it: make yourself useful, be the helper, be the one who gives, because giving feels safe, needing something feels terrifying. So these children grow up, and they become adults who are extraordinary at taking care of everyone around them, and completely lost when it comes to taking care of themselves. Psychologists have a term for the internal belief system these people carry: negative self-schema. It's a deeply held, often unconscious framework where the self is seen as fundamentally flawed, undeserving, less than. And here is what's fascinating and deeply painful about negative self-schema. It doesn't make people cold, it doesn't make them selfish or withdrawn. In many cases, it does the exact opposite. Because if you genuinely believe, somewhere beneath conscious thought, that you are not worthy of good things, then the only way to feel like you matter is to make other people's lives better. You become the emotional backbone of every relationship you're in, the one who checks in, the one who notices when someone's mood has shifted, the one who remembers the small things, because you have spent your entire life paying attention to other people, because it was safer than being noticed yourself. And from the outside, it looks like pure generosity. From the inside, it often feels like running. Here is where it gets really important to understand. Research consistently shows that giving to others, generosity, kindness, pro-social behavior, is genuinely good for your well-being. That part is real. But what the research almost never talks about is why someone is giving. Because there are two completely different kinds of giving. There is giving from abundance, when you help someone because you genuinely want to, because you have enough inside yourself that sharing feels natural and joyful. And then there is giving from scarcity, when you help someone because somewhere inside you believe that your value as a person depends on being useful, when every act of kindness is quietly keeping score, when you are giving not from an open hand, but from a place of quiet desperation. Same behavior on the outside, completely different experience on the inside. People operating from scarcity will give endlessly, but every time their kindness goes unnoticed, every time they pour into someone who doesn't pour back, something tips inside them, and they return to that familiar, hollow place: I am not enough. People who struggle with self-worth tend to be exceptional listeners, remarkable at reading a room, eerily good at knowing what someone needs before that person has even said a word. And for a long time, we call this emotional intelligence. Which it is, genuinely, these are real skills. But what we often fail to ask is, where did those skills come from? Because when you grow up in an environment where the emotional temperature of the adults around you determined your safety, you learned to read people, fast, accurately, as a survival mechanism. Sensing when a parent's mood was shifting, anticipating what someone needed to avoid conflict, managing the feelings of others so that the environment felt stable enough to exist in. Those survival skills grew up with the person. They got dressed up in different clothes, and now they look like empathy, like attunement, like being a great listener. And they are all of those things. But there is something quietly heartbreaking about realizing that your greatest social strength developed because, once, you didn't feel safe enough to just be a child. Here is what makes this so difficult to recognize and so difficult to treat. The self-hatred doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up as someone standing in front of a mirror saying, "I hate myself." It shows up as not being able to accept a compliment without immediately deflecting it. Feeling genuinely uncomfortable when someone does something for you, a weird, almost guilty discomfort, like you don't quite deserve it. That quiet, persistent suspicion that if people really saw you, not the version of you that shows up and helps and gives and listens, but the real, unpolished, needing version of you, they would leave. So you keep giving, because as long as you are useful, there is a reason for people to stay. And the most insidious part, most people who function this way don't even recognize it as self-hatred, because it doesn't feel like self-hatred. It feels like being realistic. It feels like humility. It feels like I just don't think I'm that special. And the culture around them constantly reinforces it. We celebrate selflessness. We call it noble. We make it a personality trait to be admired. So the person running from their own pain into everyone else's life gets told over and over that they are so good, that they are so giving. And those words land somewhere complicated because they are exactly what that person needs to hear and completely beside the point. There is one question that tends to crack things open. Schema therapy research, attachment theory, years of clinical observation, they all point to the same thing. The question is this: when do you feel most deserving of love? For most people who quietly struggle with self-worth, the answer is the same. When I've done something helpful, when I've fixed something, when I've been useful to someone. Almost never just because I exist. That distinction between feeling worthy because of what you do versus feeling worthy simply because you are is one of the most important things in this entire conversation. Because a person who can only feel deserving of love when they are being useful will spend their entire life performing usefulness, exhausting themselves in service of others, and never quite understanding why, even when everyone around them says they are loved, it doesn't fully land. There is a specific kind of grief that lives inside these people, one that almost never gets spoken about. It is the grief of having been an adult in a child's body, of carrying emotional weight that was never supposed to be yours, of learning, early and thoroughly, to suppress your own needs so completely that by the time you reach adulthood, you genuinely cannot locate what you want anymore. Ask these people what they need, and they will deflect, push a little, and sometimes you will see something flash across their face, something that looks like panic. Because needing something opens a door, and the last time that door was open, it didn't go well. I want to be careful here, because I'm not saying that people who are kind and also struggle with self-worth are broken. Human beings are far more layered than any single narrative allows. Someone can give from a wounded place and from a genuine place at the same time. The warmth is real, the love is real, the care they have for the people in their lives is absolutely real. But what is also real, they deserve to give that same quality of care to themselves. Not as a project, not as something to earn, just because they are a person. And when that shift begins to happen, when someone who has built their entire identity around being the giver starts to let themselves receive, starts to let themselves need, it doesn't feel like relief at first. It feels wrong, it feels selfish, it feels like losing a version of yourself that, even if painful, at least felt familiar. Recovery from self-hatred doesn't look like waking up one morning and loving yourself. It looks like a long, slow, non-linear argument with yourself, where the voice that tells you that you don't deserve good things starts, incrementally, to lose the argument. If you recognized yourself somewhere in this video, not in a vague, surface-level way, but in the way that feels uncomfortably specific, that recognition matters. Most people spend their entire lives inside this pattern without ever seeing it clearly enough to name it. The fact that you can see it, even partially, even uncomfortably, is the beginning of something different. You were never meant to earn your place in your own story. You were already in it.